So I'm going to do a quick overview of Lightroom here. I'm going to start off in the library module because that's where we always start with our files. When you log into adobe.com and you download the software, assuming that that's the way it works for students, you're going to open up Lightroom and it's going to have a blank center tab. It might ask you if you want to create a new catalog, or it may just create a catalog that is just lightroom.lrcat. Either one is fine. I always organize my catalog to have a separate catalog with each project, but other photographers just have one giant catalog that they import all of their photos into, and they organize it inside of that one catalog in a different way. So first thing first, you'd want to import photos. I'll make a separate video of how to do that, but you'll notice that there's an import button as well as an export button in the bottom left corner. And the idea behind this is that Lightroom is an image database system. And so you'll want to put your files onto whatever hard drive you're going to keep them on permanently. So that may be your computer, or that may be an external hard drive if that's the way that you work. Photographers usually have many external hard drives of some sort, but whatever works best for you. And you'd use the software to import them you'd import them into the software, but the original files would stay where they're at. So Lightroom works on this system where it remembers everything instantaneously when you do it, because it's just remembering them in a data file. So like I'm trying to say, it's kind of like your photos stay where they are, and these changes that you see in the software don't actually get applied to the original file. It's a non-destructive editing program, and once you've made all the edits that you want to it, the idea is you then export it. And when you export it, you create a new file. So you always have the original file, you always will end up with a new file with those changes applied to it. The important thing is that when you go to upload something for a grade, don't grab the original file. You always want to make sure that you export it from the software as a new file, and then that will be where you'll see your changes. So that's basically what we do in the library module here. You can also see some important information, such as on the left. Well, if you're working with a lot of different files, you'd be able to see all photographs versus collections, which actually you can make collections of smaller groupings. So if you were to work in the way that you have one Lightroom catalog for all your photos, you can make a collection, and it's basically a folder where you can sort out everything that you don't want to see. It doesn't copy the files when you put them into a collection. It just makes it so you can kind of sort the files you want into a collection, give it a name, and keep them kind of organized. I can see here where on my hard drive these photos came from. So if I wanted to see only those files out of this batch, or this import, or this kind of file that I actually physically that I have on my hard drive, it's not physical because it's data, but on my computer organization file structure, I can see this is the actual name of the folder, and it's on this hard drive, is what I'm trying to say. We won't really use publish services, but you could publish things to different locations, like Flickr, so that it goes up on the internet. I believe you can do it to Instagram, Facebook, that sort of thing, although I believe Instagram has kind of blocked that connection in more recent years. On the right-hand side, we can see our histogram. We have quick develop settings, which I don't recommend using. We can keyword different files for organizational purposes, be able to find something that we want, keyword list, and then we have our metadata, which will tell us a lot about the camera. For example, I'm shooting with the Canon EOS 5DSR. It says my ISO. It would normally say my focal length, but I was photographing with a manual focus lens that doesn't actually communicate with my camera. I've got my copyright info in here, which I'll show you how to do when we import, the name of the file, and then there's also some information up right above or below the histogram, my ISO, my focal length, my aperture, my shutter speed, And I think the 88 is the number of images in, oh, okay, it's a number of files without a smart preview, which I'll talk about probably at a later date. So that's kind of our organizational module. And then most of our work will actually be in the develop module. So we have presets. Again, I don't particularly care for presets, at least for the purpose of a Photo 1 class where we really should be learning how to make our photos look as realistic to what we saw when we made the photo as possible. There's a history showing when we actually make edits, we can go back in our history. And then here's the collections again, if we want to organize our photos. And on the right side, histogram, similar to what it was before. We have different tools, cropping, retouching, red eye reduction, gradients for applying things to part of a photo and not others, and then a brush to do the same. I'll go into these things in much more detail later. Most of our work will be in this tab of basics, playing with exposure, contrast, and different things that adjust highlights and shadows and pulling out detail in different ways. But there's a bunch of other tabs down here, and we'll go through most of them, some early on and some later on, but different ways of correcting small problems with our photos or that sort of thing. So that's where most of our work is, right? Then we still have map, which only really works if you have imported images that work off of a camera that have a GPS coordinate to them, or tracking system to them. So like a cell phone, but some cameras have that as well. I would say most traditional SLR cameras do not. There's a book module. So if we're making books, which I don't think we'll be doing in this class, I have a book project in my Photo 2 class. So we often use this. Slideshow, which we may try out this semester as a way of kind of doing work in progress critiques. We can make slideshows that we can flip through easier. So instead of doing like a Lightroom, a PowerPoint, it might make more sense to just build a slideshow that can then be previewed full screen. And then we use the print module a lot for making proof sheets, which is what this is kind of set up for, as well as traditionally working in with prints for all of our critiques, or at least most of our critiques. We would have students set up images with like a white border around them so that if your image is a 2:3 aspect ratio and you're printing on a 4:5 aspect ratio sheet of paper, which is pretty common, so 8:10 paper with whatever 2:3 proportion file out of your camera, we'd add a little space to all four sides so that it can relatively maximize the size of the image, but have the presentation nice and clean, where you're not kind of butting the edge up to the sides of the photo and then having a white bar across the top and the bottom. So we'll get into that later. And then web, which is designed for making an actual web gallery to share on the internet. Commercial photographers would use this a lot. I don't believe that we'll be diving into this at all. I don't normally cover it in a traditional class. And I believe it really is only going to function if everyone had their own website to upload to. So that would be the main issue. So that is kind of the summary of the organization of Lightroom, and we'll dive into the rest of it in more detail later on